indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchek. Alderwoman Tablaco. Here. Alderman Meyer.
Here.
Alderman Hancher.
Here.
Alderman Bach.
Here.
Alderman Parrish.
Here.
Alderwoman Schneider.
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Here.
Mayor Herbert.
Here. First up, well, staff's going to run us through the presentation and the overview. So Administrator Jones will lead us through that. We'll get help as needed from others. And then, for those of you who haven't done this before, we have everything listed out department by department. We're going to go all through that in painstaking detail. Just kidding.
Hold on, let me
If there's
take
any
notes.
questions, we can dive into each of those areas as needed, but they're just on the agenda, so we're allowed to talk about them. That way they're on the agenda. So with that, take it away, Will, and we'll see where the questions go as we progress through the material.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the committee. We threw a lot of reading material at you late last week. We not only have tonight's Appropriations Committee meeting, we have a council meeting tomorrow with several meeting agendas with some robust topics of discussion. And then we have National Incident Management training on Wednesday night, many of which you will be in attendance as well. So we appreciate your attention to the information that's being presented and put in front of you throughout the first part of this week. I also want to thank all the department heads who are here in attendance tonight for all of their attention and detail to the work that has culminated in the budget before the Appropriations Committee. There was a lot of work, a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings that occurred, and certainly budgeting, as we all know from our respective professions, is not just a once or twice a night, a year type of exercise. It's not a 1 month or 2 month exercise. It is a year-round exercise. Budget development certainly is a phase or a season within the calendar year, but there's also budget administration, which goes on throughout the fiscal year. And our departments and their respective staffs do a tremendous job of managing the public's resources here in Mequon in a very responsible and stewardship fashion that we can all be proud of. And, you know, there's the budget reporting cycle as well. As soon as we get through with the budget process, the finance department will be kicking off preliminary field work for the audit, which will serve as the capstone to fiscal year 2023 once we hit the end of December. So, budgeting is a big part of what we do. It's a big exercise, but it's a never-ending process. And through that lens, that big picture lens, we'll take a look at the budget that's before you here tonight for fiscal year 2024. And as I would look at it, it's very much a macro budget. You know, if you think back to those economics courses you may have taken in college, microeconomics and macroeconomics, a lot of what we do here in Mequon relative to budgeting would fit more into the category of microeconomics. But a lot of factors and considerations that have been brought to bear here this year as we've gone through our development process are of more of a macro nature or a larger economic perspective. Overall, the budget is up just under 4% for the year, and a lot of that's being driven by what happened at the state back in Madison earlier this year in the spring, whereby $590,000 of new revenue was approved for the city of Mequon through an increase in the state shared revenue allocation. The budget also prioritizes wages, benefits. In a tight labor market, unemployment continues to be very low. The jobs report just last week, another 300,000 jobs were added to the national payroll. This budget also accounts for higher inflation, which we've been experiencing over the last 2 years. Those are macroeconomic factors that have a real impact here at home in Mequon, and this budget attempts to address some of the factors or experiences that we've been seeing firsthand here in the city. It also advances some of our previous commitments, not only with respect to federal grant funding we've received through the Recovery Plan Act to the tune of $2.5 million, but it also honors our commitments to our partners in Thiensville through the newly established Southern Ozark Fire and EMS Department. And looking ahead, and because budgeting is a never-ending process, it preserves future flexibility relative to our tax levy, which is limited under state law, relative to our debt service, which we'll be talking about at our mid-strategic planning workshop early next year, as well as our fund balance, which is really our piggy bank should, things go awry and we need to draw upon those funds as may be needed. So in a big picture sense, we've got some resources, but we've we also have some challenges rather, and this budget, from a big picture perspective, attempts to address everything that we're doing on a microeconomic level. You saw this slide at our budget workshop meeting back in late August. These are the building blocks, or the pillars rather, the key focus areas that were identified by the Common Council at our strategic planning workshop early last year. And at the very bottom, we've got financial stewardship. This budgeting exercise that we're going through here this year is part and parcel financial stewardship, which leads directly into public safety and capital improvements, which comprise over half of the city's annual budget. From there, those building blocks, we're able to focus on service delivery, which is customer service to the residents and the taxpayers that we directly support, which leads to an excellent quality of life here in Mequon that the community has a stellar reputation for here, both regionally and statewide. So these are the building blocks. We'll be revisiting these areas as we go into the strategic planning workshop early next year. But this is also a lens. When we drill it down and bring it more locally, this is the lens which we look through to develop the priorities and the spending that you'll see in tonight's budget plan. So quickly, I'll just run through some of the highlights and then we'll get into a broad overview of the revenues and the expenditures. We'll walk through some more details relative to the fire department budget and capital spending, and then we'll wrap it up and open it up for questions, conversation, and discussion. As noted in the transmittal letter that laid on top of the budget document that went out on September 29th, we're adding an additional firefighter paramedic through the Southern Ozark Fire and EMS Department. There is money in the budget to update our parks, our comprehensive parks plan for the next 5 years. We're expanding our flock camera system by 33%. We're also including adjustments to certain employees' pay and compensation relative to the compensation study that was completed early this year. The Southern Ozark Fire and EMS Department is assuming all of the fleet maintenance costs in line with the intergovernmental agreement that was approved last April. And we're also increasing parks funding on an annual basis by 50%, or $25,000 over the $50,000 that's historically been in the budget over the last number of years. On the revenue side, and as we talked about during the budget workshop back in late August, the state restricts the amount by which municipalities can levy or adjust their levy to net new construction on an annual basis. And for 2024, as we recounted, this is up by just under 1.2%. And of that 1.2%, 160,000 is going to the general fund budget, and another roughly 70,000 will be allocated to the sewer budget in accordance with their levy requirements. As was also recounted at our workshop meeting last month, we have excess levy capacity of about $250,000. So if there is anything else that the council, or the Appropriations Committee rather, is seeking to add back into the budget tonight, that opportunity certainly exists. I would argue that in a year where we're getting a rather substantial sum from the state in terms of new shared revenue, this may not be the year where we need to raise taxes or raise the tax rate, because we have the use and the leverage of those new funds from the state. But that's certainly a decision for all of you to think about as we walk through tonight's discussion, preserving that excess levy capacity may come in handy next year or a future year where we have less available revenues through net new construction. Building permit revenue, as was recounted in the budget document, has been reduced by about $100,000 or 10% of permit revenues based on a slowdown or a decrease in permitting activity, which is directly correlated to the next bullet point, the higher interest rates, which we've seen over the last 2 calendar years. We've made some adjustments, we think rather conservatively, on the investment income side, and we'll realize or be able to offset some of that reduction in permit fee revenue next year. We're also staying true to the ARPA spending plan approved by the council last November and reducing that amount of money by $135,000. So we're taking it down to the planned amount of $65,000 for budget year 2024. After next year, we will not be able to use those funds, or we will not recommend programming those funds for future use within our operating budget. As also noted at our workshop meeting, there's a fee review underway of our comprehensive fee schedule. The Finance and Personnel Committee took a first crack at that at their meeting last month. They're teed up to complete that review tomorrow night with the Police Department, Public Works, Parks, and the Finance Department. So those recommendations, which are rather targeted in nature, will be coming forth as part of the budget package that you'll vote on and likely adopt at our meeting in November. So here's just an overview, and this is taken right out of the transmittal letter within the budget of the major revenue sources. You have taxes, state revenue, intergovernmental revenues, licenses and permits, public safety fees, and other revenues and interest income. And as you can see, intergovernmental revenue is going down by about $200,000. That's attributable to the reduction that I just talked about in ARPA funding of about $135,000. And we saw another reduction in the local highway aid that the state is giving us to the tune of about $68,000 to $70,000. So we're seeing a reduction there. The increase in state revenue, state shared revenue in the second line is more than offsetting that number. In other revenues, Jennifer, what is that increase attributable to?
The other revenues
The
line.
220,000? Is that the pilot agreement?
That would be the pilot agreement, yes.
As was noted in the transmittal letter, Newcastle Place, which has a value, a real estate value of about $64 million, recently received an exemption, a real estate tax exemption. And so as part of the development agreement that was approved by council in conjunction with their plans to expand some residential housing units there, a pilot agreement has been negotiated and executed to offset the loss of tax revenues that they previously paid. So if you look at the taxes line item at the top, where we're seeing a slight reduction, and the other revenues where we're seeing an increase of $220,000, that payment in lieu of tax agreement, which will go into effect next year, offsets that reduction in property taxes that they used to otherwise pay. So that's really just a snapshot of the revenue picture. All in, we're seeing an increase of just under $700,000.
Hey, Will,
Yes?
can you just elaborate quickly on Newcastle? Is that, it's 20, so you're saying about $24,000 a year loss in tax revenue because it's going to nonprofit? Or what was,
No, I think that.
What is the
that
loss of tax
delta,
revenue?
That accounts for net new construction going up and then Newcastle coming off.
And Newcastle was about the 220.
So the net of that,
The
A
net
year
new
was
construction
220?
was like,
yeah.
okay,
So we just took $1 out of the taxes pocket and put
Yeah.
it in the pilot.
well, that's too bad the pilot's not even gonna be a drop in the bucket compared to the loss in tax revenue, so.
Well, it's,
No,
no,
it's
it's 1 for 1.
it is one
Is
for
it
one.
1 for 1?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're offsetting that change, and you're just seeing a change in the major revenue categories in terms of where that income, or that revenue rather, is being realized.
Thank you.
On the expenditure side, we talked a little bit about health insurance premiums and the marked increase that we were seeing from the state at our workshop meeting back in late August. Thankfully, the increase was not as high as originally advertised. I think the number that was being floated in August was closer to 15%. All in, the municipalities here in Ozaki County will see about an 11% across the board increase, which is leading to $150,000 worth of additional expenditure in that category across all budgets, or all divisions within the general fund budget. As noted, nearly all compulsory expenses have been included for 2024. These were compulsory or necessary items that all of the department heads identified as needing to be included in the budget. Some of the major drivers included expenses related to next year's presidential election, right-sizing our legal services budget to account for the 2 new contracts that were approved late last year, increases in motor fuel within the police department and in the public works department, and then an increase in road salt expenses as well, due to anticipated increases we're likely to see in the price of that commodity. $87,000 has also been included for the repair of the HVAC air handling unit behind the wall upon the screen which we're looking at right now, as well as some necessary ceiling repairs which will occur because they have to actually cut a hole in the ceiling to get into some of the duct work to make that repair. We have $25,000 in recurring revenue for the library programmed into the budget, and 3 supplemental funding requests have been included, including a membership in the Wisconsin Policy Forum, some software to help our detective bureau with cell phone and cybercrime, and the Parks Plan update that I talked about just a few moments ago. Big picture, you can see the changes that are occurring on the salary side and the benefits side, which is generally attributable to health insurance. We're picking up some additional dollars in the materials and supplies account, as well as purchase services. Those are directly attributable to the compulsory increases I just talked about a moment ago that were identified by our department heads and our city staff in terms of necessary dollars that need to be in the budget for next year. And then we have adjustments for the library and the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department. Both of those are listed within the general fund budget as grants to those 2 respective component units. All in, it's $670,000, which lines up directly with the amount of increase in the revenues we just described. On the capital front, pay-as-you-go funding, as was explained at our workshop meeting, has been up over 50% since 2015. For 2024, our combined annual spend will be just under $4.2 million. That includes $2.8 million worth of debt service, which is going to retire all of the bond issues that we've pursued in the last number of years, as well as pay-as-you-go funding requests to the tune of almost $1.45 million. 44% of the pay-as-you-go requests are being funded, and then we're adding on top of that the one-time repair to the air conditioner and the ceiling that I just talked about for another $87,000. We also have 3 ARPA projects whereby we anticipate spending a good amount of money. The expansion of the Lemke Park Pavilion to provide restrooms at one of our flagship parks. That is going to be put out to bid here shortly this month, and then we anticipate construction starting at some point next year after the council approves the bid award late this year. We have the land management system that we'll be actually purchasing next year, and we also have plans to expand the brush site so that we can expand the hours by which our residents can use that with an automated gate and some other improved amenities. Currently, as was described at our workshop, no debt is scheduled beyond 2033, and so we're building that capacity through maintaining level debt service to take on the next set of projects or the next facility project that the council deems necessary and worth pursuing when we have that conversation. Here's a look real quick, and we showed this slide at the workshop meeting of where the capital funding will go, the pay-as-you-go capital funding. You can see at the bottom of the screen in 2024, we have an uptick in the building repairs column for the HVAC upgrade, and then we have some slight interplay there with emerald ash borer and tree replacement. Now that we've made so much headway on emerald ash borer, we're starting to shift a little more towards tree planting, and we've always done tree replacement planting, but we're starting to see a little bit more money go towards that effort on the back end of that work. Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department. Chief Bialk was here, I believe, in July, and he shared with the council that year to date, we've achieved 99% shift coverage across all of our shifts, 24/7, 365. That is likely to continue through the rest of this year and is really a feather in the cap of not only Mequon and Beansville, but the men and women that serve us in the fire department, now known as the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department. And based on that, we have a budget that'll be increasing just under 10%, which includes a levy adjustment of $57,000 and change. And based on that adjustment, we'll be bringing forth a resolution for both the city and the village board to approve in conjunction with adoption of the budget. As I explained at the budget workshop meeting, state law allows municipalities with a joint or intergovernmental fire department the ability to raise the levy beyond levy limits by CPI plus 2%. And I think that number, that figure, CPI plus 2%, was 7% based on the measurement period that concluded at the end of August. The Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department Board of Directors met in September to review the department's budget for next year and approved a 4.3% increase in that levy adjustment, which is well below the 7% otherwise allowed for by state law. As mentioned earlier, 50% of one of the city's mechanics' salaries will be included in the 2024 budget, in line with our commitment to consolidate the two fleets in 2023. And $300,000 in ARPA funding from the county will also be included in the budget for the second and final year in 2024. So when you wrap it all together on the operating side and on the debt service side and the capital side, this slide provides, and this was in the packet, an overall summary of the budgets from 2021 through the budget proposed for 2024 and the changes that we'll see on a year-over-year basis between this year and next year. When it's all said and done, the budget with debt service and capital projects will be just over $22 million as proposed. From a taxpayer impact, the mill rate due to the fire department adjustment will be increasing slightly from $3.11 per $1,000 of assessed value to $3.13. As noted earlier, the tax levy will be reducing or decreasing by about $24,000, and the net impact will be a slight increase in taxes paid, and as has been recounted in past budget conversations with this committee, a 1 cent increase in the assessed value, or the tax rate rather, is equal to about $4 a year on a home of value of $400,000. Additionally, as we move into considering any additional spending, 1 penny added to the tax rate allows the council or the appropriations committee rather to add in an additional $53,000 worth of resources to the budget. So if there's anything on the supplemental list or the compulsory list that the council would like to entertain, $53,000 worth of spending would equate to a 1 cent further adjustment to the tax rate. Director Engroff is still awaiting state manufacturing values, so these tax rates are what we think are really good estimates, but we'll know more probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks, Jen?
Yes.
And so we'll be able to finalize the tax rate likely before budget adoption in November. And then the sewer levy, we're going to talk a little bit about that at tomorrow night's Sewer Utility District Commission meeting. That's to be determined pending the budget meeting, which we now have a date for. So when you wrap it all up, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, budgeting is a never-ending process. We had a number of objectives for 2023, which we were able to see through. That included increasing the amount of shared revenue that the state provides to not only Mequon, but municipalities across the state. Previously, the city had been on record from a policy perspective of being in favor of eliminating the personal property tax. We had sent letters to our legislators, and that came to pass and will no longer be in effect starting in 2024. Staff was able to complete a budget review with the library staff, and we shared those recommendations at our workshop meeting in August. As I mentioned, we're going through the fee schedule update, and there are also adjustments to the pay plan based on the compensation analysis completed earlier this year. In 2024, we're going to be doing some debt planning for our next facility projects. The finance department is going to be leading a review of our impact fees, which have not been looked at in a number of years. As I was discussing with Alderman Parrish earlier today, we're looking to negotiate a new joint library agreement so that we can establish a clear funding formula on a going forward basis between the city and the village and the library, and it's not left to just the whims of the budgeting cycle on a year-over-year basis. We're also going to resurrect a long-range financial plan that was originally developed by former Finance Director Watson. With some of the staff turnover we had in the finance department in the last couple of years, we've had to kind of set that aside, but we think that's a good planning tool for the council and the staff to have at our disposal as we talk about long-range planning, both from a capital perspective as well as an operating perspective. And then, wasn't quite able to get to this, but there have been some discussions with the mayor and the representative to the Park and Open Space Board about establishing a Parks Foundation to give us some supplemental income through fundraising efforts to further address some of the capital needs within our park system, which is expansive and certainly in need of some additional monies. So, with that, staff has prepared a fiscally responsible budget that accounts for wage, insurance, and retirement increases as we set out to do at our workshop meeting back in late August. We've addressed a number of necessary increases identified by the departments. We've preserved a steady tax rate with a slight increase for the fire department, and this is a planned increase that was part of the IGA that was approved over a 5-year period. And so we're trying to stay true to that plan as well and continue to upstaff where we can. And we're ensuring a stable fund balance and future levy capacity through the document that's before you tonight. As I mentioned, there are other opportunities to adjust spending if the committee deems that to be appropriate. And next steps after tonight include our meeting tomorrow night. Don't know if we'll need a second Appropriations Committee meeting. We've been able to really get this done in one night over the last number of years. We'll be publishing a public hearing notice on October 26th, just before our sewer and water budget meeting, which is now set for the evening of October 30th. And we'll have the public hearing and hopefully the budget adoption at our next council meeting on November 14th. So, I will stop talking at this point. And
That's
Mayor,
all right.
turn it back over to you, and if there are questions from the committee.
I think we just open it up for questions. I think it was pretty clear and concise. Right to it, Alderman Meyer.
Excuse me, questions on 4.3% on the Southern Ozaki Fire Department. Is that going to be a separate line item on the tax bill?
No.
That's going to be incorporated in our $3.13.
Yep.
It's not its own taxing district, but the cost gets split up for the IGA and that all comes through the regular taxes. It's accounted for differently when we talk about the levy cap, the levy capacity. It's got a different levy cap compared to the rest of the funds. So it's being tracked separately.
Is that something that's allowable to have as a separate line?
I don't have an answer for you. But that's something we could look at.
It would just be interesting to see that, so how the residents, how they see how the cost of that, we're providing that. You know, to see that whole,
I can tell you it probably won't be something that we'll see on the tax bills that go out in December, but we would certainly be happy to investigate that and maybe have a conversation with the county and or any attorneys at the state level that might need to weigh in as to whether or not that's permissible and something we could explore.
yeah, I'm not talking about this year, future.
Yeah.
Future years would be interesting.
Okay, happy to do that.
Alderman Schneider, Alderwoman Schneider, sorry.
I just wanted to make note of something I actually talked to Administrator Jones about today, because when I looked through the public safety section of this, I was surprised that relocating 2 flock cameras, this is on packet page 32, I think, because of the I-43 construction was not included in the budget. And this, I was told, is just an oversight, because to me, that's a compulsory cost. I mean, we don't have control over I-43, and we have to move the flock cameras. But with these 2 flock cameras that are being purchased, somehow this cost of relocating these flock cameras, which is listed on our sheet as $3,000, is incorporated into the budget this year. So I just thought other people might have questioned that as well. So that should have been a different color. It is included in the budget.
You took one of my questions.
Ah, good. Well, that's why I said it, because I thought if other people might be thinking the same thing.
On that point, and thank you for pointing that out, Alderwoman Schneider, the police department is recommending the purchase and installment of 2 additional flock cameras. Right now, we have 6 flock cameras, and we are proposing to go to 8 flock cameras. And each flock camera has an annual cost of $2,500. So right now, we pay $15,000 a year for the flock cameras, the 6 that we have in place. Going to 8 will increase our annual spend to $20,000. And Chief has negotiated a 5-year contract, so that pricing will be good for, I believe, the next 5 years. As part of the I-43 project, as Alderwoman Schneider explained, we need to relocate the positioning of 2 of our existing cameras. That's a one-time $3,000 cost. That is included in the budget. And then there are also installation costs, I want to say in the neighborhood of about $1,500 or so for the 2 new cameras. And so we have monies, both in the operating budget as well as the ARPA spending plan, to account for all of those one-time expenses and those ongoing expenses in connection with this upgrade. Thank you for raising that. It wasn't as clear as I was hoping to lay it out in the documents. They didn't quite all connect, so thank you.
While we've got the map up, I'd like to point out, for those of you who don't know, Concordia has a few flock cameras of their own, and they're funding their own, but they've patched them into our system. So they did it for their own security at the campus there, but they're basically covering the east side of the Highland Road interchange for us as part of what they're doing just for their own campus security. So we certainly appreciate that. It's at least a camera or two we didn't have to otherwise purchase.
About the school district, do they have any that are connected?
No, I don't believe they do, no.
Has a decision been made on where the new cameras are going?
Chief, do you want to come up and maybe have a seat at the table?
Here.
So the current proposed locations for the two new cameras are on the map there. So one would be on the west side of I-43 at the new interchange with Highland Road. So we're hoping that one camera can cover that, since Concordia is covering the east side of the freeway there. And then the second one would be on Wauwatosa Road, going northbound, in between, just south of Donjas Bay, essentially. And then temporarily, we're gonna take the two cameras that we have to move from I-43 and Port Washington Road. We're gonna temporarily move those, one down where the new ramp comes off going northbound on Port Washington Road, and then over on Granville Road, just north of County Line Road.
Great. Is there any plans on Mequon Road there once that interchange gets all redone?
Yeah, so then we'll move those two cameras back. Obviously, we'll get data and see how our data did from those two cameras, from those locations.
Gotcha.
We'll move those two cameras back to Mequon Road and I-43, unless we determine that the data was better down on Port Washington Road. So we'll let the data determine that as the time comes through.
Okay. I just wanted to be noted that I've gotten a couple of calls from residents concerned about east of I-43, specifically in District 8.
Yeah, so down on the southbound Port Washington
Correct.
Road, yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so I figured, once all the dust settles with I-43 over the next 2 years, we may be coming back and asking for additional cameras. But this is where it seems to fit right now, based on the construction and the timeline. Let's get some data together, and then as the project finishes, we can add cameras
Sure.
as necessary.
Great, thank
Try
you.
it before you buy it.
What's that?
Try it before you buy it.
Essentially, that's what we get to do a little bit.
What do those cameras allow you to do? I mean, is it, you said collecting data, is it?
That's a good question, because not all of you were here when we first,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot about security cameras,
purchase
but I
them,
don't know necessarily about the flock camera.
Yeah, so what the cameras do is they just look at license plates and vehicle descriptions as they drive by. So the cameras identify makes, models as best they can, colors, unique features on the vehicle, and license plates. It doesn't look at people or occupants at all. So as an example, as a camera drives by, it loads a stolen license plate database from the state of Wisconsin about every 6 hours, the system does. And so if a car drives by and it sees that license plate, it takes that license plate and compares it against that list. And if that list is listed as stolen, it will send us an alert, and then we can go out and respond to that alert. Alternatively, as far as data goes, if we have a crime that just occurred and we are looking for a blue minivan with a red splotch on the backside or some sort of unique thing, we can type in blue minivan and search for that and see what comes up. So that gives us, timeframes and information. We've solved a lot of cases over this year with the flock cameras, and it's been a real time saver and crime solver for us.
Nice. Is there an ideal number of those cameras that you'd like to see? I mean, is it something you'd add 1 or 2 a year for 5 years, or are you getting close to the?
What we're trying to do is work with the surrounding jurisdictions to maximize and trying to get the, if there's a private entity that wants to join. So, we're working with Ozaukee County, because Ozaukee County is working on putting some up near Pioneer Road. We're working with Germantown because they're working on putting stuff on the west side of the city. and we're working with Brown Deere because they're starting to put some cameras down, so ideally, we'll need more as the freeway finishes and things like that, but, you know, we're just kind of evaluating that as we go.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions? Alderman Parrish.
Just a quick question for community development. I appreciate, I think the LIS system, it's great we're doing that for ARPA. My main question is that, well, I think we'd all like to really see it implemented, obviously, and I know you said we're going to. Is there really enough staff to do that, to really get the project done this year? Because I guess what I don't want to hear is that we didn't have enough resources to do it when it's just a matter of hiring a consultant, or bringing in some more help. I just want to make sure that we're giving you the resources you need to get it done this year. So that's my question.
Well,
This has been going on a few years now, but it's a process, I get it.
without getting too far ahead on tomorrow night's conversation, because I know Director Tollefson will be providing an update on the organizational, or the operational analysis, rather, that was performed about 2 years ago by Management Partners. That study was concluded in late 2021. And right about as the council was accepting that report, there was a concerted effort and a decision and a determination made by the council at the time to pursue consolidation of our fire department with Thiensville. And so we had just completed the study. The plan was to start moving forward on the LMS system, and then it was like, time out, we're shifting directions, and we're gonna merge fire departments before Mayor Worth leaves office in May of 2022. And so the race was on to make that happen, and staff had to pivot and devote our energies accordingly. Now that we've got the consolidation in place and we're marching forward on some of the deliverables identified in the IGA, I'm confident that we're going to have some resources available in my office, in addition to the newly hired IT director, that are going to bring together the staff members necessary across the organization, engineering, the assessor's office, finance, community development, public works, to lead an effort such that we will be procuring a system and bringing you a contract 1 year from now. We have additional resources identified through our partners, Avero, who authored our Information Technology Strategic Plan, our 5-year plan, that was also adopted by the council in late 2021. They are ready to go when we give them the nod.
So it doesn't sound like we're planning to implement this year. We're a year out from implementing?
Well, I can't say for sure, Alderman Parrish, what the timeline is going to be. We're going to move as fast as we can relative to the workload at hand.
Okay. Well, I guess, again, I appreciate that staff has limited resources, and so that's the underlying point of my question.
Right.
So do you need more resources to get it done? Or does staff just not want to get it done this year, or there's just not enough time? don't
To
think there's
answer
an
your
answer.
question, I'm not asking for additional resources relative to the procurement, the selection and the procurement of a land management system. To the extent that we may need additional resources for implementation, which I think is probably, the more difficult phase of that overall process, we would likely come back to you and make that request and have that conversation.
Okay.
Alderman Bach.
Just two quick questions. I think on our public welfare committee, we've been, there's the topic, or at least it's a future agenda topic, is a community-wide survey. And I don't know if that's something that's gonna potentially happen next year, 2024, or does that have any budget implications for doing a big project like that? Or, that was one question. And then can remind me on the capital side, is there a capital reserve fund that you can kind of pull a lever, so for a major unanticipated expense, how do you deal with those kinds of things, you know, where something happens and then all of a sudden, hey, it wasn't in the capital budget. What levers can you pull to deal with that? Those are my just two questions.
Okay. Well, I'll take the first part on the survey. Pursuant to the committee of the whole calendar that was in your packet for tomorrow night, there is a discussion scheduled in December to talk about the community survey on a council-wide basis. Right now, it's in committee at Public Welfare. That's 3 members of the council. There's a plan to have that discussion across the entire council to determine when the appropriate time to initiate that survey is. It's not an inexpensive undertaking, both monetarily and from a staff resourcing perspective. And if there's desire to move forward on that immediately in 2024, I will tell you right now there is not money in the budget, but we do have a little excess ARPA money that's available and that we've used for those type of one-time or infrequent expenses in the past. So that could be certainly a way of paying for that. But there has been no council-wide direction to include monies in the budget for a community-wide survey. Right now, it's at public welfare.
So yeah, in addition to ARPA, going back to the broader question of, do we have money in the bank for unplanned things? We certainly do. I think at the end, this budget, if it all shakes out, we'll have about 11% of our operating budget in the general fund. So that's round figures, about a couple $1 million. It's sitting there if we need to pull it. We've certainly used it.
That's like the reserve fund.
That's just the general fund. There's other capital funds which we put a little bit of money into every year that are longer term capital sinking funds that we saw it earlier. There's $110,000 put into a sinking fund for fire and EMS equipment. We put a little bit of money in every year for that thing, so when it comes time to buy something, we're not always going out and borrowing $1 million for a ladder truck. Things like that. So there's capital accounts and the general fund sitting there to cover things. They're just not part of something like that would be something we'd pull out of ARPA or general fund, or a combination of both.
Got it. Thank you.
Alderman Meyer.
It is something in public welfare that been trying to get on the agenda in public welfare, just have initial discussion on them. And for a citywide survey, it just hasn't been able to come about because of the city staff, that coordination of being able to do that. Time is being used up by other stuff, which is a lot more pressing than the citywide survey. So we haven't been able to sit down and discuss, even if we had wanted to go and bring something forward and something that nature forward. So
Sure.
And so that's the only reason why we've been haven't been able to sit down and discuss that. And it's fully understandable with the amount of workload that some of the city staff had to do in some of the reports and, in some of the getting together the survey for salaries and for all that different stuff in that part. So.
Yeah. As long as you're asking, and now that we have a strategic plan in place that takes us through calendar year 2025, from my vantage point, the ideal time to do a survey would be in early 2025 as we kick off the process to develop our next strategic plan to succeed the plan which we have now, and that'll expire in 2025. If we pick that up late 2024, early 2025, the council will have the benefit of that information and that feedback from the community in order to make even better planning decisions relative to that update. So just a thought from a timing perspective.
Well,
we see the value in doing it soon.
yeah, my thought process is that while the strategic plan is through 2025, and that may not be the directions that the residents want, and to get their feedback and all that would be needed to do that. what we're looking at now is a year and a half then out, or maybe 2 years out, to get that feedback. And we could be going in a direction that they don't want us to go during that period of time. So sooner the better for me to get that, so we get that feedback, because feedback from the previous two really gave us some good direction on which way to go and which way to develop areas and not to develop areas.
Okay.
Any other questions? Alderwoman Talaco.
I just had a question. Now, is the school, like when the tax bill goes out and if we approve a 2% increase or 2-cent increase, is the schools taxing going up for the community as well? Or do we know what the, like public school and education and Concordia is doing?
Concordia?
Yeah, for the schools that come on the
Concordia
tax
is
bill.
private.
MATC, or, yeah, I'm sorry, MATC. And the public schools?
I don't have any real-time information at hand relative to what the property tax impact will be for our other taxing bodies. I think they are going through a similar process whereby they are finalizing their budgets and their levies in time such that that information can be submitted to the county for the generation of the tax bills, which will go out in early December.
We're all on the same schedule.
Yeah.
So they may be having a meeting right now, I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I think Grafton, like in the news graphic came out and they were like lowering taxes due to like new development. And I thought they had the school information as well. So I was just curious what Mequon Thiensville was planning for as well.
Historically, settle our own budget affairs here, and they settle theirs, and those two get added together at the end of the year, and they are what they are. We can control what we can control. That's a whole other body of elected officials and a whole different taxing entity. Any other questions or comments on the budget or a motion, perhaps? Alderman Parrish.
I still have some more thoughts, thank you. I should have started before with great job to staff on preparation of this budget. I know we had a little bit of help from the state to kind of fill in some gaps, but I feel like this budget really meets the organization's priorities, and we're accomplishing a lot for all the departments and for the library and the Parks Board, which, as you know, I'm the liaison on, and I know firsthand that our chairman and vice chairman are very grateful for, I guess, the values that this Common Council and staff are expressing by increasing the funding for the parks. There was the sense just so much to do and not enough funds, so I feel like what this does is sets up 75,000 in new, I'm sorry, 25,000 additional reoccurring funding each year, and that gives us something to work with. So on behalf of the Parks Board, thank you to the council and staff. I did speak to staff earlier. I know Alderman Gephardt and I have had our eyes on the dog park. I'm not looking to take us on a tangent right now, but my point is that we don't need to factor in the budgeting for fixing the West Side Dog Park parking lot, because we are assuming that the funds are there as part of our road program funds, if not our drainage funds. Otherwise, right now, I would be looking to add in funding to make sure this got accomplished in 2024. Basically, this resulted from the freeway ramp opening up right across the street from the West Side parking lot. As soon as the Mequon Road ramp closes, everyone's going to be using this entrance ramp right across from the dog park. So you're going to be hearing more and more about this from your residents. So I'm just updating you guys on this topic because I'm assuming we don't need to factor this funding in, which was confirmed to me by staff earlier. I'm sure they would speak up if they disagreed, so that's why I'm just making statements like this.
Who gave you that information?
It's just what Director Lundin and
That WISDOT is going to do it?
no.
We typically handle parking lots out of the road program.
Yep. We don't know what
So
the
we
plan
have
is.
to-
It might be
Can you just
expanding the
speak to
lot or.
that, Kristen, if you don't mind?
Correct. In 2024, we'll be in year 3 of our third year borrowing, which includes not only the road improvements contract, but parking lots as well. So out of that borrowing that has already occurred and is already in balance would be the reconstruction of the parking lot. We're still working through some logistics. We do think that it would be a better option to expand the existing northern or eastern, depending on which you want to call it, parking lot, and then eliminate the one on the west side so that the safety concern, both with the conflict between the motorists coming off the ramp and any concerns about dogs going towards the freeway would otherwise be eliminated.
Great, thank you. That's a good solution, actually.
It really,
The
it
mayor
really
gets
was,
The mayor gets credit for that? Oh, thank you,
Way to
Mayor.
go,
Yep.
Mayor.
I'm not sure I can take all the credit.
so it's already built into the
Part of a-
funding was my
It's part
point.
of a discussion where that was discussed.
Yep. Just making sure.
No, that's a good plan.
And then last meeting, I spoke a little bit about our partnerships in other communities, and I guess I tend to do this every year during budgeting, because this is a good time to make plans for the following year. Certainly very grateful for staff's effort to work with the library and Thiensville for the kind of analyzing how savings can be achieved. And at the last meeting, we asked for the fiscal agent fee to be waived on behalf of Thiensville that they're charging the library. It's about $8,000 a year, maybe $9,000. So I'm not sure, I don't think there's an update on that, but it kind of goes into my point. I went and looked online today. The Thiensville released their budget, and certainly not voted on. I think they're there tonight discussing this. They are only looking to increase their library budget by like $600 for the year. We are increasing it $25,000. And this year we will be going up to 91% of the library funding because of our increase. And a result of their $600 increase, they're going to be going down to 8.96%. From 9.1%.
Oh.
So either way, SOFD funding, Thiensville does 15%, 15.5%. So we're below 9% for the library. We're just giving an extra 25 because we're generous and we support the library, and I still think we should. But it just underscores the need for the library agreement to be a more fair, equitable solution, and that it times out better with the budget so that we know what they're going to give and they know what we're going to give. The library gives one request and each organization gives their percentage. It's not this guesswork.
Can I ask a question related?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm still not entirely sure. I know that there's several different ways to calculate how we're gonna fund the library. And I thought one of the ways is based on assessed value of the community, how much circulation your folks use from how many books they take out, let's just say, from the library, et cetera. So that those variables are used to come up with a dollar figure. And so is that why we're different? Is that because can you just explain to me, I guess, how the formula works?
You know, the library director's here, maybe you wanna answer,
Or do you know,
I
Jen?
can start, and certainly
doing it that way
anyone
because
else
it's
can
a lot
chime
more
in.
expensive.
Okay,
you wanna do it the more,
so are we just
we
doing
could fund it
In fact,
more.
we don't have the levy
we're doing the
capacity to do it that
3-year
way.
average thing?
We've been doing the 3-year average historically. Now, that changed last year when we funded, I think it was an additional 42,000 or so.
46.
It was 46, but it was 42,000 over and above what we were required to do per the 3-year average calculation. And now with this year, with the incremental 25,000, it's, more like 56,000 that we're funding over and above that 3-year, because the 3-year average this year is, 1.075 million. So, and we're 56,000
This
and
is
a half
really
over that.
Really another mess created by the state of Wisconsin, where they have these ways you can pay for shared libraries, and you gotta pick one of them.
Equalized value is the other
Yeah,
other option on the left-hand side there, which we historically have not followed.
So we end up using the maintenance of effort one because it's far less expensive by a long shot, but what it doesn't have is a cost of living adjustment programmed into it.
Right.
Just like shared revenue didn't have a cost of living adjustment programmed into it for all those years.
So this is where we are this year.
So would Thiensville just be doing their own 3-year average, so that since we increased ours 1 year, we're up on our 3-year average? I think
Thiensville
they
is meeting
hold-
tonight,
Yeah.
so it's, and their meeting started at 6 o'clock as well. I don't know that we have any definitive information from what they're doing or what they're including in their budget.
But they're under the same construct as we are presumably, the 3-year average
Well,
construct.
They are, but that determines the minimum.
Oh, okay.
This is,
We last year voted to pay above and beyond that because it had been like 10 years with it, no
Gotcha.
adjustment basically at all.
this is what we have in the budget this year. Per the maintenance of effort formula, this is what we could take it down to for next year. But rather than going backwards, which is the 3-year average, which includes this and the previous 2 years, staff is recommending that we increase the budget by another $25,000 to get us to this number. Now, the formula you referenced, Alderwoman Schneider, relative to assessed value and circulation, would require us to pay this amount of money. I don't know that this is in the cards or has been in the cards for the city for a number of years. That would be all of our increase and then some.
No, that would be huge. I got that, but I was just trying to figure out, because I'd read about that one, how we ended up being asymmetric with Thiensville, per Alderman Parrish is concerned. So it has nothing to do with circulation, I got that. Okay, we're just doing the 3-year average, and we just decided that, given the fact that this has been flat for so long, and that everyone's costs have gone up, to contribute more last year, and that makes sense.
They went through a compensation, a portion of the compensation analysis that we conducted. They are subject to the health insurance increases that we're seeing. To take their funding down or to keep it flat, I don't know that we're helping our library manage their expenses in a responsible fashion. Staff is proposing that we give them $25,000, and hopefully Thiensville, through the fiscal agent fee and/or some additional revenues, helps them to close the gap on their expenses for the next fiscal year. It remains to be seen, and we'll probably know more this week.
Okay.
Is there any kind of, on these joint Mequon, Thiensville kinds of things, is there any like pre-budgetary discussions with their finance people to say, hey, what are you doing with the library? What are you doing with the, these joint areas where you say, hey, our meetings are coming up?
Yes.
Is there some of that?
We had 6 meetings, as you'll recall, as part of the budgetary review process
Oh, yeah,
that kicked
the
off
library.
back in March. The library was also a participant in our departmental budget hearing meetings. We met directly with the library director, and we've continued to have conversations throughout the budgeting process.
Yeah, so
I think your question might have been more with
Whether we
Thiensville.
talk to Thiensville about it.
yeah,
There's certainly a
specifically
robust
about the-
mechanism in place for Southern Wisconsin Fire Department. There's- Our maintenance of effort, that's the state program, that's a little antiquated. There's no cost of living adjustment mechanism at all built in there, so you just keep them flat forever, which is like budgetary death. I think that's what we aspire to do next year, is to get something, put pen to paper, and get something that's a little more
Absolutely.
fair for the library and
That was
equitable
my
to both
question.
communities
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah, that was the question.
You can do 0% a couple of years in a row, but it's just, you've done budgeting before at university school, it's just, you
Yeah.
can't hold that forever, it just, the rest of the world keeps on moving on without you.
Thank you.
Well, it does feel like the library's budget should come out before both municipalities do their budgeting, so that both organizations have that input. And it doesn't feel, when does your budget happen?
We work on our budget, through this entire budget season, but we cannot set our budget until we know what our allocations are.
Yeah. Well, think, again, that's the shared agreement. Once we update that, we'll really address all of this. I just wanted to point out the inequity for this year, and that unfortunately the library didn't get as much money as they could have, because our other partner didn't increase it by as much as we did. That was all.
But we don't know what they're doing tonight. We remain hopeful.
They're online, they have a $600 increase. I read their budget, so I did hear that maybe one of their trustees might throw out an extra increase, which would be wonderful. I assume that won't happen, and I think the fiscal agent fee should be waived again.
Yeah, there's certainly no
So
reason.
that would make it whole for this year.
I would agree with that. They should consider throwing that one in.
Yep, and the library will be better off.
Would the council like me to put that in writing and send that letter to the village?
Yes.
I think so.
Thank you.
Great, nice offer.
Okay, thank you.
We could perhaps point to the fire department agreement where we're the fiscal agent, but I don't think we're charging it all back. We're just handling it in-house and,
Okay, we can talk
yeah.
offline. I don't want to write the letter here.
We've got a busy week. There may not be other time to write the letter. Any other comments on the budget? Good discussion. Or a motion? Alderman Meyer.
I was going to wait for the section where there was an adds or subtractions inside here. Just appropriate time to.
I think we're there, yeah.
We're there. So, one of the things I did talk to Will a little earlier about, and I did talk to the chief and mentioned it. One of the things we get in public safety all the time is that speeding. And all of you get that all the time. And it's one of the biggest issues that we have. The police department does what it can, and it can't be everywhere at all times. One of the things that I thought that we might do is put in about $20,000 into the budget. I talked to Will earlier, so there might be some ARPA funds to do that instead of put it into the budget, but in transferring over into the budget for them. But I'd like to propose $20,000 so that the police department or Public Works, whatever, be doing that, purchasing the speed indicators, the lit speed indicators that are radar controlled, so that when we do have a request, that we have some of those. I think we have one of those. We have two of those. You got the trailer one, right?
We have the trailer module, and then we have a small little sign one that, we can.
One over there, but I feel a little inadequate when we're at like a public safety, when all we really tell the residents is that, we'll try to do a few more patrols inside there, which we appreciate all that, chief, or we're gonna send out a little newsletter and to remind everybody that it's 25 miles per hour. If we were able to position some of these around at residents' requests and have them out there for a while, studies do show that it does tend to decrease the speed in the residential areas when you use that. And while it does also show inside of that once you take them away, speeds go back up a little bit again, but over the long haul, it does tend to drop those speeds a certain percentage inside of that for that if you use it again along in that process. So I would like to do that. I think the average cost of those things are somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000. I think I'm looking at that. And it does give the city, it also does give the city, especially the police department, some added data too for during that area that we're taking the radar shots of that. And it's not for anything for shooting license plates or doing anything of that nature. It's just to try to control traffic and try to calm it down. So I would like to propose and make a motion that we add the 20 grand in, and if Will can say that we have 20 grand in the ARPA funds that we can use towards that.
I'll second that motion. I think that the police department has been spread rather thin. There's been more speeding, I think, than we've had historically, or at least I hear more reports of it. And they do directed patrols, but they, like you referenced, can only be in so many places, and I think they can only stay there for a brief period of time. I don't know that they have a huge effect. I think this would be a kind of a force multiplier with a fairly reasonable cost, so I think it's worth adding.
How many are there now, and would we really use all of them if we were to make this expenditure?
And we got, like, I think we have one trailer, and then we have one small one.
And how much is and how much is each one?
They're between $4 and $5 grand.
4 to 5 grand.
Okay.
While we're on the topic, I did put this on a request for the Mequon Thiensville Community Foundation as a potential donation item for a couple of these.
So you want
Who
4?
knows if that'll happen? That's variable and.
So, you know,
The words of
I
another
don't have a number in my head. This would have to be a cooperation between myself and DPW, because obviously these types of signs, we wouldn't be able to, and the police department wouldn't be able to install and move. So I guess, you know, what we would like is we can certainly manage as far as complaints can be routed to us, and we can try to schedule where they would go, but then I'd have to go over to Kristen to figure out their schedule and see how, you know, how long we would put them, and you know, what would be, if there's any basic requirements or specific policy direction as far as, you know, who gets it. Because there will be a list of people probably a mile long.
Right.
So I don't know if you would have to establish some parameters to say, you know, it's gotta be on a street that has X number of traffic as opposed to, you know, one small subdivision street. You know, those are things I try to balance now when I'm moving our little speed board around, and it takes a lot of effort, so, you know, I think I think they do work. I would definitely agree with that, and I think it would help. I just don't wanna be, you know, subject to the whim of whatever, so some sort of direct policy from you guys to help us locate those things. You know, we can certainly manage the program, but parameters to operate
I heard
under,
a
I guess.
request for 20,000 and a commitment by public safety to develop a policy early next year.
Do you want to weigh in, Public Works?
I was just trying to pull it up. When the mayor mentioned for the Mequon Community Foundation, we did look into some options. I just want to maybe not be the naysayer here, but there are some limitations for power. And so obviously there could be some increased expense if we have to look at the solar powered ones. And that also makes it more complicated to install, not impossible or impractical, just more complicated. But I signaled the request for a policy going up because otherwise I think some neighborhoods will just constantly request them to otherwise stay in place. So I do think that there should be parameters established for both how the request is made, how long they would be, whether or not there's any limitations on the frequency under which they can be requested, so that it's not just the fight for them throughout the year, that there's some metrics set up for how and where they would be considered to be placed.
Good item for public safety.
Yeah, we can put that on there, right? That would be a good discussion topic.
You do that, and you can have that subject to a policy before implementation.
And there are options, but at least the one that we had up there is 4,500 for one unit, so
Is that solar or not solar?
that's solar.
Solar,
And you definitely have to go with the solar-powered ones, so.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are many locations in the city where there's not otherwise power to be able to get it, so.
Pass along the email, but I found lots of cool mounting hardware that goes right on the existing posts. That was too far down the weeds to keep going with. Alderman Flacco.
Just a question is, I think it's a great idea. It's the #1 complaint that I've received in my short tenure here. Does parking an extra police squad, is that more cost-effective and easier also to do? Because it's used quite frequently, I know in the Florida Keys especially. A lot of times I see the first responder and everyone's going 40 down Mequon Road. So those are like other effective ways to help control speed while and possibly a little bit more cost-effective than, people going, well, I want one in my neighborhood. Could that be another option?
You know,
Or
we've
reasonable?
experimented with parking squads. We had a holiday patrol at one time when the pavilion was a real popular area, and we parked squads over at the pavilion, and we didn't see a huge benefit to it. I know what you're saying. I get it. I've seen cars parked like up on embankments on the freeway, and everybody slams on their brakes when they drive by, but then quarter mile down the road, it goes right back to where it was. And unfortunately, you know, right now, squads are hard to come by. So tomorrow night, you'll be seeing some resolutions coming around of us trying to deal with that problem. And there's a lot of expensive equipment in the car. So, you know, our cars essentially double in cost when you add the cameras and computers and radios and all of those things, and to have those unmanned out there where they could get broken into.
Well,
Just
that's
don't
an
sell
excellent
your
point.
old one with
I
engine
wouldn't want to
failure.
leave, and then you've got to send a guy out to retrieve the car and go put it out there. It becomes a manpower.
Well, it could be a
issue.
decoy squad. It doesn't have to be a fully
Well, we don't own those either, though. Signs are much cheaper than even a decoy car. This is getting a little off of budget. We got a request and a motion in a second for a pot of 20 grand for looking at radar signs, basically. If we vote to create that, we can always grind on these details a little bit early next year before we spend the money. So maybe it'd make a topic for future consideration, but at least there'd be a budget to do it with.
Can I just
Alderman
ask
Gephardt.
one
Yeah.
last question? And Chief, if you had $20,000, would you put it to another flock camera system, or would you put it to a device, you know, that takes radar for speed?
Other stuff.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of balancing that takes place. It's a tough question on the spot. You know, I like, you know, the mayor had suggested that the signs get donated. You know, that's always a great spot to start. We ask a lot of our donations in our community. Certainly speeding is a complaint I think that a lot of you get, and so I think that would help address some of those complaints, hopefully, if we can come up with a good policy to help that. But if you're handing me $20,000, I wouldn't be buying speed radar signs with it, probably not. That's the roundabout way to answer your question, I guess. I think it certainly helps with some of the more predominant citizen complaints, but a lot of the citizen complaints don't take into account the workload that we have. So, in the cases that we're working on, that really don't get noticed.
Thank you.
Well, we have a motion and a second on a potential amendment to the budget.
Mayor, do you want to see if there are any others and vote on them?
Yeah, we can vote on them individually or in total. Why don't we,
Don't
well,
individually, why not?
yeah, we'll just line them up and knock them down.
I wouldn't mind having that one separate, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Okay,
This one separate?
Yeah,
yeah.
Are there others?
I don't know.
Could be the only one.
Let's just vote on it. It might be the only one.
Let's call the question on just that one item, and then we'll open it up for any other items.
I
Question,
just wanted
Alderman
a
Solaka?
clarification if we were gonna, vote on your motion. Alderman Meyer, do we have to specify specifically that we'd be purchasing these radar cameras, or could it be allotted $20,000 towards the deterrence of like speed?
Or
That would-
Speed
What?
speed
Like
enforcement
deterrence to,
solutions.
like, yeah, so that if maybe we could come up with, if the police chief felt like he wouldn't necessarily spend that large sum on that specifically, would there be other options that we could also then allocate that money towards as far as solving the issue?
Well, I guess there's always other options that you can do stuff through. I just thought of this because of the fact that every person here continually gets the residents, and continually see it over at public safety and that they're talking about speed. And like I said previously before him, we really don't do a lot for them. I mean, we do, except for here, we're going to put it in a, for you, make sure that your residents know that it's 25 miles an hour, and the police does everything they possibly can, but this is at least some other tool that we can say, okay, here, once we set up the policies for it, and say, here, we can do this for you in addition to, and besides stationing a squad car at every corner, I mean, you're not gonna be able to.
Inherently, the problem is we've got about 48 square miles of land and 4, maybe 5 squad cars out at any given time.
It is true. In my short time on this committee, I mean, we've had groups that have come from neighborhoods at least twice, maybe 3 times.
You just can't possibly be everywhere all the time.
And they
when
come
you're,
with their kids, and they come passionate,
Yep.
and we
So
don't
we're
really
just
offer
putting it in the budget
solutions.
for this purpose, but sometimes that happens that they use it for something else, but we just want to get it as,
I mean, in public safety, we'll coordinate with
yeah.
with the chief.
it's not the whole budget. It's built up of a bunch of things. We're committing to spend the
Yeah.
dollar amount. What we spend it on could change a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Well,
So, last November, in conjunction with approval of this year's budget, the council adopted the ARPA spending plan, which is included in your budget as Exhibit D to my transmittal letter. This document is going to change if we approve the $40,000 to update the Parks Master Plan. That will be identified as a specific project called out on the plan that comes back to you for updating or adoption, pending that update. This year, the police department had $15,000 for a phone recorder that was also called out as part of the ARPA plan. Irrespective of the budget that we're discussing and looking for a recommendation on here tonight, the Appropriations Committee could also alternatively direct staff to earmark $20,000 within the ARPA spending plan for speed deterrence, pending the adoption or the establishment or the creation of a policy relative to the deployment of these. And it would be called out and earmarked and almost saved, for that matter, for that purpose until such time that the council decides or gives staff direction to go forward and deploy or implement. So
That's fine.
Love it.
we can, we don't even need to vote. You can just tell me to do it, and I can bring it forward in conjunction with the budget, and it'll be there reserved for whatever use the council decides, whether it's December, January, March. You have the flexibility to,
ARPA's not even part of the budget. We just talk about it at budget time.
but you have a spending plan that you
Correct.
formally adopt by resolution
But don't we have to have everything earmarked by the end of this calendar year?
next calendar.
Next calendar year, and
Yes.
spent by 2026?
Correct.
Oh, so next calendar, thank you. Okay, so we have time to move it around a little bit. Thanks.
So,
Still would like, maybe like to have it go more on record with the fact that the common council was directing to set aside the $20,000 upper fund.
We can vote on the direction,
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do that.
that's fine.
right? We'll vote on the direction.
All right.
Any other comments before we call it to a vote?
So you're changing your motion to direct ARPA?
To
modifying
to
it?
use
I think it-
$20,000 in ARPA funds.
Yeah.
I think it was always ARPA funds, but
It was always gonna be that, but
That's
it's
fine.
not really part of the budget, but just a formal request from council to direct staff to change the ARPA plan. Then we'll vote on that
And
another time.
Would you still request the donation? Or that be?
Well,
Either
that's
way.
totally
It's out there.
separate. We don't control that. I threw it out there as
But if they say yes, then
then we just won't spend.
Adjust, yeah.
If they donate 2 and it's about 10 grand, we'll spend 10 grand, not 20.
call the question.
Pardon?
Move to call the question.
Yeah, I thought we were, but.
We are, we're just discussing
Blah,
prices.
blah.
All right, let's call everyone in favor of the $20,000 for speed deterrence. Raise your hand. Anyone who doesn't support it? All right. There's broad support. Okay, any other actual amendments to the budget? Or a motion to propose approval as written?
Make a motion to approve.
Second. Motion and a second to approve the rest of the budget as written. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Talaco.
Aye.
Alderman Meyer.
Aye.
Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
Alderman Bach.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schneider.
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
Mayor Nerben.
Aye. The ayes have it.
Excellent.
There's just one motion left to make tonight.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank
Go
you.
Pack.
Good job, budget.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer, and all your staff.